Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. Infamous here, coming back. I guess it's a more casual video. I was actually just taking a look at some of the Necromancer changes. Very disappointed, I should say, very disappointed by some of these changes that they're coming up with. And in just reading the developer comments, it says, due to many of the current targeting issues with corpses and tether abilities, we are allowing shocking siphon and its morph, as well as restoring tether and its morph to bypass the global cooldown. And this is actually pretty game breaking, but I'm not going to go into that, as there is a global cooldown. It's there for a reason. No one uses this ability anyway in PvP, so it's kind of useless, but the restoring tether is important. And this sets, of course, a bad precedent where, real quick, there's a reason why that there are global cooldowns in the game, and it's to stop from chaining a lot of abilities. Problem is that if ZeniMax starts to go down this route where, well, we can't fix something, so it's going to bypass the global cooldown, it makes it a lot easier to multi-chain abilities before you even see them, which is what people complain about, where you take like or before you take the light attack, the surprise attack, the alt, like the bash, and you'd never see any of the animations because people were, it was bugged, and you'd be able to push everything all into one cloak, and then all of the damage would get buffed by the critical damage from via cloak, as well as the extra what's called max spell weapon damage that you would get, because it used to happen all within one global cooldown, and everything would get buffed by that. This, of course, sets a bad precedent. I always say the easiest fix is the shortest route, right? Easiest way to fix this problem is have it just target the nearest corpse for both the tether as well as the damage. For the, like I said before, for the shocking siphon ability, literally picks it, you pick the nearest corpse. It does like a hand animation, the corpse explodes. It uses the same exact animation from the Silvara scales set, and you see like this little poof of poison. It hits everybody. It does damage over time for everybody that's caught in the ability, and we fucking move on with our day. Fixed. Same thing with restoring tether. Instead of restoring tether forcing you to be tethered, you probably would have to nerf the amount of healing that you get, because it makes it easier and then does not force you to be a stand your ground class, and that, which is why the healing on that ability is so ridiculously overpowered. I talked about this in one of my previous videos, how they completely overbuffed restoring tether, despite the fact that it was already performing very well prior to them removing the cost. They then removed the cost to the ability and then subsequently increased the amount of healing, further breaking the ability in any event. It says here, we're currently working on alternative methods to improve the targeting of these abilities, as well as improving the reliability of created corpses and their duration, but are not ready to implement them quite yet. We're aware of the frustrating nature of attempting to use these abilities, which is why we have added a small stopgap measure in the meantime until we can properly solve the issue. And the problem is that the issue is so simple that it doesn't really need a patch after patch after patch for a developer to come up with a fix. The fix is very simple, and I've stated it like I said previously. Make this ability right here, make it an AoE ability. You pick the nearest target, or you can just stare at whichever corpse, or just target the nearest corpse and you blow it up, right? You blow up the nearest corpse. It can only target one corpse at a time, and it blows up either make it directional or blow up the nearest corpse that you've casted. An easy way to have it is you cast Blast Bones. Blast Bones then hits, it connects, it dies, and it leaves the corpse, and then you blow up that corpse, or just tie it to the Blast Bones corpse. Make it so that the ability looks for the corpse left behind by the Blast Bones. You can give it a specific signature, in the coding, that the Blast Bones leaves this type of corpse behind that can be detonated by Shock Siphon, and boom. And it doesn't affect PvE, because in PvE you're going to do the exact same thing, and it doesn't force you to have this clunky tether ability. It just does AoE damage, it sticks to your opponent, and you move on with your day. Same thing with the restoring tether. You can make that one tied to either your major armor ability, or have it tied to the skeleton that's dropped by what's it called, the Mender, and you move on with your day. One thing I was highly surprised that they nerfed some of these abilities because they're like they underperform as it is because they got nerfed last patch. My Boneyard when Necromancer first came out on my Magicka build was like my tooltip was like 25k. My tooltip is like 13k now. It got completely gutted, and they further gutted the ability even more and gave it a cost increase. And I'm like, what? Like what? Like you must be joking. Colossus nerfed because of PvE for all those people that are out there. This is a PvE nerf for everybody that's like PvP is always infringing upon PvP, and PvP is always infringing upon PvE. This is nerfed because of PvE, because everybody complains, oh, Necromancer is the only class that gets picked for, you know, for endgame raids because of the Frozen Colossus gives major vulnerability. Boom, nerfed for PvP. Thank you, PvE players. With that said, let's move on. Shocking Siphon decreased the damage per tick of this ability and its morph by 33%. That is ridiculous. It really should have nerfed the healing. This actually should have been left untouched. Nobody uses it. Nobody uses it. At least nobody uses it in PvP. It's kind of worthless in PvP. Like if you're killing people with this ability, then the people that you're killing are not worth killing. Skeletal Mage, I was highly surprised that this got gutted by 50%. 50%. It is really strong. Let me just pull up one of my builds real quick, just so you can see on a Stamina Necromancer. I thought it was very strong. It does AoE damage, but it doesn't target. Like it targets the nearest person. That nearest person can be a pet. It can be a tank. It could be, you know, anything. It could be a random pet summoned by, you know, Sork pet. It could be like there's numerous things that it can hit. But where was that? Take a look at that build. I can look at it. I guess we'll look at it here. And then the Necrotic Underlord, I think I recently released this build. And this build runs about 4,600, almost 4,700 spell damage. I mean, weapon damage. But in taking a look at, where is it? It's got a pretty decent tooltip. You can see it right here. And this is by no means, this is a no CP. It's got a 5k tooltip every 2 seconds. That got gutted. They just made this ability absolutely useless. It was very situational. In its use. The Magicka version of this ability is already shit, because if you look at it, here, and this is by no means maxed out. Like I've run like 5,600, like I've gotten Skeletal Archer and no CP to be like 65, 6,600. But if you look at it on a Magicka build, like if I look at it on, where are we here, on my Magicka Necromancer, and this is a well-balanced build. Magicka Necromancer just underperforms in PvP. And just looking at the ability, where is it? Right, 38. So you just gutted this ability for Magicka Necromancers. I mean, I wouldn't use it really as a Magicka Necromancer, but even on a well balanced build, on this Magicka Necromancer, it just underperforms. And of course, ZeniMax doing their things, right? They're killing it. Say. Bone Goliath, the Bone Tyrant. It says pummeling Goliath, fix an issue where activating the special bash attack from this morph would not turn your character to face the direction you cast it. Didn't even know that was a thing. But in any event, very surprised by some of these Necromancer changes. I really want to see what are the changes to some of the other classes. I know they're focusing on Necromancer, DK, Sork, and I think Warden. Here we go. There's DK right here. Actually, no, this is the AoE update. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at the class specifics. Here we go. Dragon Knight. This Fiery Breath, it says this ability and its morph now lasts 10 seconds, up from 8. That's a damage reduction because I know that they're gonna scale the damage back. They increase the cost to 3,500. Magicka DK already struggles with sustain. I don't reduce the damage per tick over time by this ability by approximately 47%. Engulfing Flames, this morph bonus flame damage taken now scales off of your spell damage 100%, 1% for every 33 spell damage. And so okay, I guess this is their way up to a maximum of 10. So this again, this is a PvE change, right? Because everybody complains, you know, oh, you don't need Magicka DKs because, you know, tank DKs, you know, are the only DKs that are used, and they have the exact same buff. You don't even need to bring another DK because the tank DK already gets this ability. There's a PvE change that nerfs PvP. So to gain the maximum amount of this ability, you now have to run a minimum of 3033 spell damage. If you are like a max Magicka DK and you're not at least this buffed, then you're taking a nerf just for the extra component of the 10%. But I can't believe they increased the cost. This is ridiculous. Magicka DK already struggles with sustain, especially because they increased the cost of Fossilize by like 30%. And then they went and increased this by an additional 700, right? The ability costs, the ability costs 2808, right? So that's probably close to about, yeah, it's about 33% times 0.3. What's the difference? 3510 minus 2808. Yeah, it's 700. So it's about a 25% increase in the cost of just engulfing. And I've talked about this before, that literally just to cast your engulfing and your searing strike is, even in light armor, is going to be around 4k, maybe 36, 37, 3800, depending upon how much reduction you have on your jewelry. But if you don't have any reduction on your jewelry, you're literally spending 4k Magicka. I mean, primarily I'm talking about no CP, where you don't have a lot of what's it called, Magicka recovery. This really hurts Magicka DKs, because Magicka DKs don't typically use a lot of recovery in their build because they rely on their ultimates. The more expensive that you make their abilities, the less useful you make things like Battle Roar, because the more expensive your ability gets, the worse Battle Roar gets. Because then now you're only, I mean, literally, you can get, even on my build, where, right, looking at my Magicka DK that I run, and I run light armor, or I think it's this one right here. Right, so I run just shy of 4k spell damage, but my Battle Roar only recovers about 5k. Or is this my healer? Oh, this is the healer. I think this is my dual wield. No, this is it right here. Yeah, this is it. All right, so I run just shy. I'm at 3800 spell damage. I get about 5k from using leap. Like, one leap is up, I use it, I get about 5k between my engulfing and my whip. That's what it does, right? 2 whips is 3500 plus an engulfing and plus a burning embers, and I've already wasted all of the recovery that I get from using an alt on a Magicka DK. And I talk about this all the time. Like, people are like, oh well, combustion got a buff. Combustion is complete shit, because it's entirely situational. It's the only passive in the game that relies on you proccing damage from the burning status effect, which means that you're probably going to have to run either a charged weapon, and I run the charged weapon to increase the amount of uptime on burning spell weave, but also to proc the burning status effect. But even with this setup, the combustion does not proc. It does not proc very often. I showed this on one of my streams where I took that exact same setup and I pulled like 5 or 6 mobs, and I put engulfing and talons on all of them, and I waited and I got maybe like 3 combustion checks after killing all 5 of the mobs, and it was like 15 seconds, and I got 1 combustion tick. It's the worst and shittiest passive in the game. It's also affected by cleanse, by Magicka and stamina night blades. Anybody that uses any form of cloak, if your opponent is using any sort of a cleanse that reduces the uptime on dots, it further reduces the uptime that you have on combustion. It's completely garbage, and it needs a rework. And I can't believe, and this is a PvE nerf for the sake of PvP. Excuse me, it's a PvP nerf for the sake of PvEers who want to play Magicka DK in endgame raids, and everybody says that Magicka DKs don't get used. One, because they probably don't do enough damage, but also because the same exact debuff, the fire debuff that they have, is used by tank DKs. Searing Strike, this ability in its morph now lasts 10 seconds. It has an increased cost again. This is a 810 increase. This is like 30% of this ability's cost. Right, 2160 divided by 3. Yep, this is literally more than a 33% increase to Searing Strike. And again, Magic and DKs already struggle with sustain. So this ability, its morph, have gained a new functionality of immediately applying their respective status effects on the enemy upon cast. Reduce the damage per tick of the overtime of this ability by approximately 60%. Wait, what? Wow, rip DKs. Rip DKs. I guess for all you DKs that were hoping to get utilized in PvE, again. Molten Weapons, this ability is morph now grants major brutality and sorcery at base. Still useless. No, most DKs are, most Magic maybe Magic DK, not even worth using. Molten Armament, they should have given it something else. They should have given it like minor, what's it called? Minor Berserk. They should have given it Minor Berserk or something else, because giving it the major brutality is kind of pointless, because there's no reason to use this ability over something like Entropy, right? If you take a look at the cost of just running this ability, where is it? Right, so if you're going to run Igneous Weapons, it's 3,500, and all it does is give you the major sorcery buff and extra heavy attack damage depending upon which morph you choose. But the extra damage that you get from using a heavy attack is completely negated, because you can just use things like Entropy, right? There's no reason not to use Entropy, because Entropy has a tooltip of fucking 25k and gives you major sorcery and can give you back sustain and can give you back extra magicka, while slotted, and gives you HP, or can give you HP over time. It's like, this ability still remains completely useless. Does this morph now increases the duration further to 42 seconds? At rank 1, up from 32. It also scales to the radius of 36 meters, up from 28. No one's going to use it. It's not even worth using. It's absolutely not worth using, because even in a raid, most people should have. For example, no one is going to give up using, forward momentum or rally just so that some other DK can buff them. It's pointless. It's a pointless ability. This is a pointless change. Should have been given something more useful to make it, more in line with what DK needed. But Molten Weapons completely still useless. Stone Fist, this has reworked this ability to be a stamina based spammable attack. It now deals physical damage like it used to at launch, since it's a rock with a reduced range of 15 meters, down from 28. Increase the damage. A Stone Fist. All right, so taking a look at Stone Fist, do they mean Stone Giant or both morphs? That kind of sucks if they removed the burst heal. It says increase the damage by approximately 66%, but no longer deals double damage if the target is stunned. Okay, so that it is this morph that they're referring to. They're referring to Stone Giant. Does this ability no longer stuns the target outright, but instead applies a stack of stagger to the enemy. After 5 stacks, the enemy will be stunned by the next Stone Fist cast. So it takes 6 Stone Fist ability to... That doesn't even make sense. Because you made it a spammable. You made it a spammable like Dizzy. But then, like, why would you not use Fossilize as a DK? Right? Even if you're dual wielding, there's no reason. There's like absolutely no reason not to use Fossilize. If you're running Sword and Shield, you're still better off using something like Shield Charge, because it has a longer duration. Like on Dizzy, even on my Dizzy build, I still use Fossilize because it just works so well. I don't know why you would utilize this. Maybe it'll give you a bar space. But the weird thing is that why introduce a new mechanic into a game? It says Stone Fist, it casts on them, including from other Dragonites. If the target was stunned, all stacks of stagger are removed. So then it does nothing. So all it does is deal damage. And if the person is CC'd, and it's what if you need, so then you couldn't even run this as your only form of CC, because if you're fighting someone and you need the immediate CC break for the pressure relief, you don't have it. So in essence, it forces you, there's no point in using this ability just to CC someone. Like, you couldn't replace it. If you were thinking, well, I can just use this to replace a crowd control ability on my bar, you couldn't, because there are better morphs, like better abilities you can use. Like if you're making a ranged build, for let's say like even dual wield, there's no reason not to run shattering rocks, I mean the other fossilized on dual wield, because you gain the extra damage from ruffian, right? So if you're using dual wield, you should be, because it gives you an additional 15% when they're stunned or immobilized. Fossilized does both, so there's no reason not to run. Even if you're running a dual wield build, you should be running Fossilized and not even be considering using Stone Fist. Does it reduce the cost of this ability to 3,400? That is an expensive stamp. That is an expensive spammable, man. I think the only useful thing about it, well, even still, it only returns stamina every 6 seconds. Stone Giant Dysmorph no longer grants minor resolve. Wait, is the base all stamina? So that means they've removed the magic aversion heal too? Okay. So this is more no longer grants minor resolve after casting, but instead enhances the stagger mechanic where enemies affected take 25 extra damage from any attack per stack. So at most that you can have is 5 stacks. So you take an extra 125 damage per stack. This effect cannot stack from multiple sources. So you're going to be taking an extra 125 damage, right? Because it stacks 5 times. It deals an extra 25 damage. But what kind of damage is it? Is it physical damage? Or is it just straight 25 damage? Is it unmitigatable? Is it oblivion damage? Like, and what? Maybe it is physical damage and then it scales. Does this damage scale? I doubt it. So it deals an additional 125 damage per tick. The only area that I can see this like really being useful is if you're running. The other problem is that if you have multiple dots on you, then the multiple ticks of damage that you take from like all the dots, double dot poisons, etc., all of those things affect this, right? Because it says here, it says the mechanic where enemies affected take 25% extra damage from any attack per stack. It's a maximum of 5 stacks. So that means that the person who has this status effect on of stagger, whoever using Stone Giant, now takes an extra 125 damage from all sources of damage. You gotta think about that in the implications of like zerging, or if you're being if you're 1vxing and you're fighting multiple opponents, this is extra free damage, not just to that person, not just from the DK, but from everyone hitting you. So for example, Crushing Shock. Is Crushing Shock gonna proc this 3 times? Right, because Crushing Shock hits 3 times. Does that mean that this is gonna proc 3 times on Crushing Shock for an additional 375 damage? And I wonder what kind of damage is. How is it mitigated? Obsidian Shard, it says this morph remains as a healer focused ability. Increase the healing by 3.3% since it was missing rank ups. And it says this morph now deals fire damage instead of magic damage and heals 2 friendly targets up from 1. Okay, so that's good. This should have been changed a long time ago. I don't know why it dealt magic damage on a fire dragon knight, on a character that's designed around fire damage. Hopefully they changed this ability as well. This ability should also deal fire damage in an AoE and not magic damage. It should return fire damage and not magic damage. Same thing with the other morph of Talons should also not deal magic damage. There's no point, because it's designed around this way. All of your abilities get buffed from engulfing, because you have so many abilities on the DK's bar, you know, that don't get buffed. Like this also deals magic damage. Like it shouldn't deal magic damage. It's just deal straight flame damage, and that can help DK to secure more kills. It says talking about Nightblade, Assassination, Teleport Strike, a Lotus Fan. This morph now applies minor vulnerability to all enemies hit. GG. Rather than the original. Increase the duration to 10 seconds up from 8. Decrease the damage per tick by approximately. Reset. That is a huge nerf, because they already nerfed it, right? It got buffed, then it got nerfed, and then now it just got gutted. Because there's like no point. I mean, that's crazy. This is aspect of terror fix an issue where this ability and its morph would fail to display effects if animation canceled. Shadowy Cloak, it says Shadow Disguise fix an issue where the critical bonus from this ability could be consumed by abilities that could not critically strike. It says, summon Shade, decrease the damage per hit of this ability and Shade and its morph by approximately 42%. Fix an issue where the attacks from this ability and its morph were heavily desynced from their animations. It says, the teleport for this morph is now 22 meters, down from 28. Since this morph is meant to operate on our gap closer or creator standard, this also prevents confusion in areas where the tooltip range would increase for the teleport but fail to actually increase. I mean, if the ability works, sure, hey, why not? Do what you want. Dark Shade, decrease the damage by approximately 15% and increase the radius of the attack by 6 meters, up from 8. This Shade will now use its area attack on a set timer rather than having a chance per attack. Path of Darkness, Twisting Path, decrease the damage per tick of this by approximately 33%. Rip mag blades. I guess for those mag blades, this is a PvE nerf, right? This is a PvE nerf because this shit didn't do damage really, and nobody really uses this in PvP. Siphoning Cripple, decrease the damage per tick of this morph by approximately 50%. Drain Power, this ability and its morph now grant major brutality and sorcery at base. And then the Power Extraction morph, which is the stamina version, this morph now reduces enemies' spell damage. The Soul Shred, the Soul Tether morph. It says this morph now also heals for half of the damage dealt upon the initial hit. It's a nice buff in order to help increase the defensive nature of this ability when you successfully cast it. Sorcerer, Daedric Summoning, Charged Lightning. It says fixed an issue where the synergy was not properly applying the Major Berserk to the Atronak it came from. I know that happens all the time. Every time I try to use it and the shit just doesn't work. Summon Unfamiliar says reduce the damage of this ability and its morph by approximately 17%. Increase the cost of the special activate of this ability and the volatile familiar morph to 4,500, up from 2,808. Wow, that is a huge cost increase. That's like almost 40%, 45%. Increase the duration of the special activate to 10 seconds, up from 8. Base cost of summoning these abilities has been streamlined. We appreciate you streamlining things. You're doing a fantastic job, to 3510. This is the Unstable Clan Fear. This is this morph damage now scales off max stamina rather than max magicka. Wait, isn't the unstable one the little pet that scampers around and does AoE pulsing for yeah, isn't that the magicka one that pulses? Where is, here we go, Sork. Isn't the unstable familiar the one, right? Oh, it's this one. So you have the volatile, okay, the HP one. The HP one, now their damage scales off of stamina rather than magicka. Decrease the cost of the activate to 4,500, down from 48. Still expensive. It says the area of effect attack now deals the same damage as the basic attack, but hits in a 6 meter radius, up from 5. I would have just rather that they made it an AoE CC instead of dealing AoE damage that's on par with basic attacks, which doesn't make sense because AoE direct damage abilities are supposed to deal less than direct than single target, but what am I thinking? Fix an issue where the AoE attack would cause the Clan Fear to reevaluate its purpose and life for 1 second after casting, lowering its potential DPS. I think anybody's going to be using this anyway in PvP, because in PvE, on the stamina build, because it requires to be double slotted. The Summoned Winged Twilight, increase the heal of this ability and the Twilight Matriarch morph to be closer to the heal of Rushed Ceremony. This will result in approximately an 87% increase for the base and approximately 55% increase for the Matriarch. It says note that these abilities will continue to scale exclusively with max magicka. And if you want to see currently what the pet heals for. Let's just take a look at it on this particular build, right? Running just shy of 3,500 spell damage with 33.5 max magicka. I've already released this build for those who are looking for it. And the heal is, it says it heals once you activate the Twilight Matriarch, causing it to heal the Matriarch and up to 2 other friendly targets for just shy of 7k. So that is going to be increased by an additional 55%. GG's. So that's going to put this, what, on my build, that would make the Summon Matriarch heal the Matriarch and 2 others. So that would be a total of, what, 11k, right? 11k per target. So it'd heal the Matriarch for 11k, it'd heal and 2 other people for 11k each. So it costs 2,700 magicka, but heals for 30,000 HP. GG's. It says ability will continue to scale exclusively with max magicka. Store calling, both skip this. The fatigue from this ability and its morph now apply only if you successfully teleport 1 meter or more, instead of whenever you activate the ability. Why would you not teleport more than 1 meter? This ability and the ball of lightning morph no longer stuns targets in a 4-meter radius from their origin location, but instead stuns targets in a 6-meter radius at the final location. That sucks. That's a huge nerf right there. That's a huge PvP nerf for Ball of Lightning. For Streak. Oh, this is says this ability and the Ball of Lightning morph. Okay, so yeah. Let me see, what does Streak do? Ball of Lightning, the morph now ranks up in duration of the summoned Ball of Lightning, which now lasts 3 seconds. Up from 2, this morph also adds 2 seconds of snare and immobilization immunity after teleporting. That's fantastic. It says Streak. It says this ability now creates a cone behind you after casting that damage and stuns enemies instead of enemies inside of it. It says the length is now 17 meters with a 40. What? The length is now 17 meters with a 40-degree arc rather than being a 4x15-meter rectangle. That's fucking confusing. Does this means the ability will require more precise aiming when attempting to land on top of an enemy, but will require less precise aiming when attempting to cast near an enemy? This is just like more like counter Zerg friendly, I would imagine. But if for example you were using this to provide pressure relief to opponents, so you have like multiple people attacking a friendly, and you've got 2 people next to him, and then now you used to streak through him to CC multiple opponents, now that doesn't work. So that is a huge PvP nerf. Right? It's a big PvP nerf. The damage that it did, like all this bullshit that they're talking about here, is irrelevant. It's a nerf. It's a nerf that is going to make it more difficult to utilize, because you really don't have an indicator of where you're going to land, right? It's not like a gap closer. The gap closer highlights and unhighlights to let you know that the ability is useful, so you know kind of how far you are away. This makes it so that you actually have to streak well past through everybody, and then the CC will take place instead of CCing as soon as you go through. Oh well. Lightning Splash increased the base duration of this ability, and it's morphed to 10 seconds. I wonder why they're buffing everything to 10 seconds. It says increased, I guess to make it easier for PvEers, because like some abilities have like a 10-second rotation, some abilities have like an 8, some were a 6, some were a 12, some were like whatever. So I guess they're kind of streamlining this to make it, PvE for dummies, so that literally everything has the same exact timer. So you just kind of like go to your back bar, you go 5, 6, you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you rotate to your front bar, and then you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? Makes it real easy to utilize, your damage over time abilities when they all deal on the same amount of damage, so that the last ability, ends up getting rebuffed when the first one that you cast drops off. Makes it real easy for you to bar swap. PvE for dummies, real simple. Does increase the base cost to $49.50. Wow. Reduce the damage by approximately 33%. It says Surge. This ability and its morph now grants major brutality and sorcery at base. Still not worth using. Entropy is still worth using. At least for Magicka. Magicka, there's like no reason not to use Entropy. There's no point in using Power Surge anymore. Power Surge completely gutted. Like you might as well use either morph of the Entropy skill, because it'll either give you sustain if you don't have enough sustain, or it'll give you healing over time if you need just a little bit more healing over time. No point in using either morph of that other ability. Templar. Adric Spear says Piercing Javelin reduced the range of this ability and its morph to 22 meters down from 28. This is to ensure they follow the function of other abilities such as Scatter Shot and Piercing and a Fiery Grip. It says these abilities will now ignore the target's physical and spell resist to ensure they have a unique auxiliary effect. And it's always good having abilities that bypass, physical and spell resistance. I know you guys out there are gonna love it, because if you haven't seen people who just spam ability, guess what? They're gonna just spam Javelin nonstop. In case you want to see how much damage does a Javelin do, right? We'll just take a look at I think it's on this ability here, my Battle Priest. Right, so I've got about 3,500 spell damage. So if I'm going to be using Javelin, Aurora Javelin has a tooltip of just about 4k. I think you're going to end up getting a lot more on a stamina build. I wonder what it would be on my second. Save. Here's my other one. What is it? The Black Prince. Here we go. What would Javelin be? What would Stamina Javelin be on this ability, on this setup? Oh, here it is. I actually already used it. It's 4,600. So it's 4,600 spammable, and it's got a pretty decent cost to it. But I mean, it bypasses all resistance now, all spell and physical resistance. So it deals true damage. Feeling that nice true damage. I like it. This is Puncturing Sweep. This ability and its morph will now snare the nearest enemy hit by 40% every time it deals damage. Oh, more snares? Couldn't ask for anything more. More snares. It says rather than snaring the nearest enemy hit by 70% on the final hit. Also, it heals all the way. It stuns. I mean, it slows all the way through instead of just the last one. I guess that's trade-off. And now snares the nearest enemy hit by 40% every time it deals damage. So instead of getting the last hit, you get to enjoy the 40% for the entire duration that you're being jabbed. This ability and its morph now properly be considered direct damage attacks rather than a hybrid of damage over time and direct damage. Note that some item sets will still erroneously trigger from the attack and will be fixed in a future update. It says updated the visual effects of this ability to better sync up with their attacks. Spear Shot, this ability and its morph now lasts 10 seconds and have had a 1,925 cost increase. Reduce the damage per tick, and you get to enjoy the reduced damage of tick by 53%. Increase the initial hit of this ability by approximately 10%, but decrease the damage over time by approximately 59% per tick. Dawn's Wrath, Backlash. This ability and its morph's final explosion can now critically strike. Just what we were asking for. The most OP ability in the game that's literally on par with an ultimate, right? Who could ask for anything more? Where is this ability? I don't even think. Here we go. Right now you've got, on this build, I've got an 18k tooltip and no CP. Now it gets to critically strike. Thank you, ZeniMax, for making Magplars even more broken next patch. We appreciate it. You're doing a fantastic job. You guys are killing it. Eclipse. Let's actually finish reading. It says, can I critically hit? Boom, baby. Oh my god. Purifying Light. The heal over time from this ability will now, as a tooltip insinuates, always apply after the effect ends via any means such as being purged, being recast, or ending naturally. It says the light cannot be stopped and shall purify all. This also means that Purifying Light will count for one less negative effect from purging. Eclipse, it says fix an issue where reapplying this ability or the unstable core morph to a target before the original expired could cause issues with the cooldown of the effects. Living Dark, this morph now only snares targets for 60% rather than immobilizing them. Gee, only 60%. Reduce the healing by approximately 10%. Oh man. It might as well be snared. It was fucking 60%. Oh man. It says unstable core reduce the initial and secondary damage dealt of this ability by approximately 44% and the final hit by approximately 25%. These attacks now happen in a 5-meter radius around the target as the visual insinuates. So now it deals AoE damage too. And this is like the damage from this morph, the unstable core, is irrelevant. The primary problem is that it provides far too much crowd control, because one cast, I even see stamina builds using Eclipse now, because there's really no reason not to. You use the envelop yourself, like there's no reason not to use Living Dark on a stamina build, because it provides unlimited amounts of crowd control for the duration. It says envelop yourself with lightning sphere for 4 seconds to protect you. It says anytime an enemy deals direct damage against you, it says the sphere lashes back, immobilizing them for 3 seconds and healing you for a little bit. And it says it can occur once every half seconds. So even if you're fighting multiple opponents, this is like for people who were like, I just don't understand, like they didn't want these type of abilities because it was overperforming on magic DK, and then they give an even far worse version to Templars. You just blow up. Then back. There's unstable core, so it's like so instead of snaring people, instead of rooting people, it's now going to snare them for 60%, and then it reduced the healing. On a stand build, it's kind of irrelevant. The other morph got a little bit of a damage reduction. What is going on? Keep doing this. It says here, taking a look at, it might be because of that giving me issues back. The fixed an issue, Solar Barrage increased the duration of this morph to 8 seconds, up from 6, decreased the damage per tick by approximately 30%. Sunfire says fixed an issue where the major prophecy from this ability and its morph would only occur if you dealt damage. It says rather than upon activation, as the tooltip states. As is increased the duration of this ability and its morph to 10 seconds, up from 8. Increase the base cost to not that big of an increase, to 2,900, so it's up a little less than 600. Still pretty costly, still about a 33% cost increase. This decrease the damage over time by approximately 60 seconds. Jesus, man. That's a lot. It's a huge nerf to the damage over time portion of that ability. It says restoring light. It says cleansing ritual. It says ritual of retribution reduced the damage per tick of this morph by approximately 33%. Didn't they increase the cost of the ability because they increased the damage? Like they did this last patch and they increased the cost of it to scale because it dealt more damage. Now they remove the damage but then don't remove the cost increase. This restoring focus. This is fixed an issue where this ability was unable to be cast while silenced. Isn't it a magic ability? Actually, the restoring focus is the stamina one. Rite of Passage fixed an issue where this ability could cause health desyncs when used while taking heavy damage. Gotta love them desyncs. Warden Animal Companion. It says the Betty Netch. It says this ability and its morph now grant major brutality at base, but didn't they already do? Oh, they give us both at base, but the base ability no longer restores magicka every second while active. Every second while active. These abilities now remove 1 negative effect for every 5 seconds. So it's a negative effect removal while it's running. Wow. Reduce the duration to 19 seconds from 22 seconds on the base ability. The Blue Betty Netch says this morph reinstates the magic of restore functionality, reduce the final duration to 25 seconds down from 27 seconds. But did they reduce the overall magicka that it returns? If they didn't, then of course, it's a buff either way, but it now also removes a negative effect. It says this ability now remove one effect from you every 5 seconds. Does that mean that there's a cooldown, like you use it and then you gotta wait to reuse it, or does it automatically remove one every 5 seconds? It sounds like it removes one every 5 seconds while it's running, which is why they've kind of narrowed down the timer to 25 seconds so that it removes one every 5 seconds. Does it remove one on cast and at the 5-second mark? I wonder. Does this morph, the Bullnetch, this morph brings back the stamina from the functionality, and of course it got reduced to 25 seconds from 27. It says dive, this ability has received new functionality to help it stand alone as a spammable, but has received some reductions to the base functionality that were in place to make up for the fact that it lacked any gameplay altering features. I mean, it was a long range spammable. It dealt good damage. I don't know. Reduced the damage of this ability by 10% and increased the base cost by 227. That's great, right? Thank you for making it function as a standalone spammable by reducing the damage and increasing the cost. It says if you are at least 12 meters from the target upon dealing damage, it says with these abilities, you now set them off balance, completely useless. I shouldn't say completely useless, but kind of useless in PvP, unless you're in CP campaign. But you can just dodge roll and set everybody perpetually off balance, so that's kind of a useless feature. Useful in no CP, where you can heavy attack, right? You can heavy attack when you set a person off balance and then receive double the amount of stamina on a heavy attack. But kind of useless for CP campaign. It says cutting dive. It says this morph, and of course it only happens when they're at 12 meters. So yeah, it's a pretty shitty change, actually. Overall, pretty shitty change. Should just do that overall. Just set the person off balance, on cooldown. I don't know. Just stupid change. Stupid change. Especially because, like, if you use it on a dual-wield warden or on any other build, but it's just bad change. It's just bad mechanic. I was thinking if you're like using it on a build, but it's like you're probably going to be using, you're probably going to be using snipe instead of pigeon spamming. I don't know. Cutting dive. It says this morph no longer reduces the cost of the ability beyond the standard stamina reduction, and now applies a bleed to the target. I love it. More bleeds. More shit that goes through mitigation. It says it now applies a bleed to the target for 7 seconds if they are off balance, which can stack up to 7 times. Oh man. Swarm. Increase the cost of his ability and its morph bot to 2970 to encapsulate their new functionalities. It says these abilities now apply minor vulnerability to the target for the duration of the dot. Wait, what? These abilities now apply minor vulnerability to the target for the duration of the dot. So it's a free 10 seconds of minor vulnerability that you get from ranged, whereas on a mag blade it requires you to gap close in. So of course, but the mag blade, it applies it to everybody. But they reduce the damage. It says decrease the damage of this ability by approximately 50%. It says growing swarm. This morph has been redesigned into a stamina ability that deals bleed damage. Yay for more bleeds. The swarm no longer spreads to nearby enemies upon completion, but instead deals damage to enemies in an area around the initial target. This damage is roughly 25% of the initial target coefficient. I don't know why they're adding more bleeds. They're adding more and more and more bleeds. And then you can just wear that set that increases your bleed damage on all of your things by approximately, 20% or something. Winter's Embrace. It says Arctic Wind. It says this ability and its morph have regained the original function of Arctic Blast and deal frost damage in a 6-meter area around the caster while the heal over time persists. It says this damage scales with your max magic and spell damage to prevent compound power or tank builds. As Arctic Blast morph, this morph no longer converts the ability into an awkward projectile stun. Instead, this ability has inherited Permafrost's old functionality, where enemies hit 3 times in rapid succession with this ability are stunned. This stun cannot be blocked. So then there's like no point in choosing the other morph if you're running a magic build, like if you're running a Frost Warden. Now you don't even have to, because you can run Arctic Blast and it does the exact same thing. And it gives you an AoE pulse that pulses every second. And of course, people who are hit up to 3 times will then be stunned. So now they have a new version. This is so deals damage and stuns now. Crystallized Shield. It says the slab morph. This morph now has a 500 millisecond internal cooldown on the damage return and Magicka refund, similar to other abilities such as Dragonfire Scales or Living Dark, which means I guess you can now light attack ability, and the light attack will then proc the slab, and then the ability will bypass slab. So this is like a lot of, I don't know if it's still not going to reduce and this is only the damage component. I wonder if it still functions the same way on the ult gen one. It says gripping shards. It says Winter's Revenge decreased the damage per tick by approximately 33%. This shit is expensive as it is. Rip fucking Ice Wardens. This is Sleet Storm Permafrost morph. This morph no longer stuns enemies who are hit. Rip Stamsork, Rip Stam Warden. It says this morph no longer stuns enemies who are hit multiple times by the effect, but instead increases the duration of the ability by what? But instead increases the duration of the ability by 1 second per rank up to 12 seconds at rank 12. Wow, that is fucking 12 seconds of team major protection. Wow. On a build that already has, and that shit lasts 12 seconds, right? It lasts 12 seconds, which means if you're playing in a Warden, right? You're playing a Warden, you have just normal ult gen that's going to give you your, normal ult gen per tick is going to be 36. But if you're also using shimmering, you then gain double the amount, right? So then for the duration of this ability, you actually get 72 alt. So you're like almost a little more than a third of the way to having your shimmering. If you're also running Bloodspawn, you can probably eke in, I would say, 2 ticks. You can get 2 ticks of Bloodspawn, or even if you just get 1, which will then give you another 14 alt. Right, so then that puts you at 86. So you're literally only like an additional 15 seconds away from being able to permafrost on permafrost. Welcome back. We're back at 1.1. We're dynamic ult gen. Dynamic ult gen reigns, only for Wardens. I guess we'll take a look at the next one here. I'm gonna cut this one up, and we're looking at the weapon abilities. Two-handed, it says Cleave. The carve morph reduced the damage per tick of this morph by approximately 60%. Rip carve. It says critical charge stampede, increase the duration of this morph to 10 seconds. I guess they're talking about the slow. What? Increase the duration of this morph to 10 seconds up from 8, and reduced the damage per tick by approximately 42%. Didn't deal a lot of damage anyway, so I really don't care. And that's when you hit the target, it deals like a little AoE damage at the center. Momentum. Fixed an issue where the animation of this ability would fail to display. That shit happens all the time, so annoying. If you had a longer source of major brutality on your character. It says reverse slash. It says reverse slice. Fix an issue where the AoE damage of this ability could critically strike. Since the initial hit can already critically strike, this was effectively allowing the attack to double crit, contributing to a tremendous power spike. Uppercut. Reduced the damage dealt by this ability and its morph by approximately 16% to assure it does not eclipse other damage abilities such as dot. But the thing is that it's a direct damage ability with a cast time. Did they reduce snipe? I hope they reduced snipe by like 24% after they nerfed it and buffed it and nerfed it and then rebuffed it. It says Dizzy Swing. This morph no longer knocks the enemy back and stuns them, but instead sets them off balance for 7 seconds. So then what are other classes that like for example Warden, right? Warden doesn't have access because if you go like 2H dual wield, it then forces you to go either 2H sword and board or 2H bow. So dual wield kind of gets thrown out the window because now you don't have a source of reliable CC unless you're going to use a magic ability, which might not be the best idea because it'll just pressure your magicka because you typically use your magicka for slab. Like on a Stam Warden, you know, you're using Bird of Prey, you're using the critical buff, which all requires magicka. So it's like you don't have room to throw in the what is it called? Arctic Blast. I don't know. That seems like a bad change. Um, but instead sets them off balance for 7 seconds. Again, off balance is just in like I said before, in CP absolutely useless because typically if you're running a dizzy build, you can just roll dodge and set them off balance via the CP passive. And in no CP, the only benefit that you get from off balance is if you're a DK, which allows you to power lash. 2, you can proc I forget the name of that set that procs off of off balance. And then 3, when you heavy attack a person who is off balance, it gives you double the amount of resources back. It says one hidden shield puncture. It says fiction issue where the minor protection granted from this ability was additive rather than multiplicative. Dual wield. Flurry reduced the damage dealt by this ability and its morph by approximately 8% to assure it does not eclipse other damage abilities, which it doesn't. No one really uses Flurry. It does really shitty damage in PvP. It's a staple ability in PvP. I don't know why it's a direct damage from melee. I don't know why they're like saying, well, this melee ability shouldn't deal as much damage as this ability that you can apply from ranged. It says Bloodthirst fixed an issue where the final heal from this ability was not properly increasing by 1% of the damage per rank. When slashes decrease the damage per tick of this ability and its morphs damage over time by approximately 63%. It's like these people just don't. You know what really bugs me about this is that all of this is just wasted development time. It's like one patch you buff it, the next patch you nerf it, the next patch you buff it, the next patch you nerf it, the next patch you completely change it, and then the next patch you're like, shit, we changed it, now we're gonna revert it back. And all this is just wasted development time, which is wasted development dollars. Right? The money that they're wasting paying people to make these changes, they can actually be making better content. Fixing bugs. How about that? How about fixing the combat bug that has been in the game forever, or the bug where you surf on your weapons? Like there's numerous things that they could have been used those development dollars to, and it's all because they don't know what they're doing in terms of how to balance a game. It says blood craze reduced the healing per tick of this morph by approximately 20% to ensure it heals for a closer value to the damage it dealt. Blade Cloak increased the base duration of this ability and its morph to 10 seconds. Increased the heal by literally increase the cost by 1925 and reduced the damage per tick by 32%. So this morph, the Quick Cloak also offers cost reduction, taking the base cost to 3780. Bow. Poison Arrow, it says decreased the damage per tick of this ability and it's morphed by approximately 63%, which of course then decreases the use of this ability as an execute, because that's kind of the point. That was kind of the point of the ability. But the weird thing was it scaled previously to 250 times. Then they upped the damage, but then they made it so that it no longer scaled to 250 times and now only scaled up to 100%. But then they reduced now the damage to 60%, making this ability like useless. Ballista updated the tooltip of this ability to show its true range to prevent confusion in areas where you could increase your range. It failed to actually increase the range of the ability. I did what the fuck I'm talking about. Scattershot. This morph no longer knocks back targets hit, but instead reduces their movement speed by 60%. Love more slows in the game. It's exactly what we needed. I guess they couldn't figure out that instead of just reverting the morph to what originally was designed, which is you're playing a long-range build, and the purpose of Scattershot was you're playing a long-range build, it was to knock back someone who was in melee range. But then they subsequently increased the range. They gave it this ridiculous heal, and at least was somewhat skillful, because you had to choose when you CC the person to get back the heal. Then they removed that mechanic because whatever, and then they made it so that every time the ability procs, it now gives you this ridiculous burst heal. And instead of just making it so that your character just takes a knee when you get hit by the ability to CC you, they just remove that and they added in a snare, which now means that bow has no stun to it. So now if you go bow, you actually need to use another skill from either it kind of hurts like my bow DK, which means that I'll have to work in a form of crowd control, and there's no other long-ranged crowd control that I could use, so then I would just use something like Fossilize. Volley increased the base cost of this ability to 4,500, up from 2,808. You're just helping me remove abilities from my bar. Decrease the damage per tick by approximately 17%. Two-tip now properly mentions their true duration. Destructive Staff, Ancient Knowledge. It says fixed an issue where this passive was not properly working with specific pets. This Destructive Touch decreased the damage over time of this ability and the Destructive Reach morph by approximately 63%. And again, I don't understand. They specifically removed the CC portion of this ability to one morph, right? And then they reduced the damage of the morph that has the CC to it, right? And then they were like, since the other morph doesn't have a dot to, since the other morph doesn't have a CC, we're going to give it a dot. And then they nerfed the dot because the upfront portion of that ability is shit. It's like 3k even on a good magic build and no CP. So then you subsequently went and reduced the damage over time to 66%. So what was the point? Right? This is what I'm talking about. Like, what was the point? What was the point of removing the CC to give it a strong dot because it didn't have a CC component anymore, and then subsequently say, well, we gave it to you, now we're taking it back. Wall of Elements increased the duration of this ability to 10 seconds and increased the cost. The weird thing is that the cost increase is not in line with the duration increase. I mean, I agree Wall of Elements needed a cost increase primarily because of the slow spam on anybody running an ice build. But for PvE, this is a huge change because it's a 25% it's a 25% increase in the duration, right? It gives you an extra 2 seconds. So it's a 25% increase in the duration, but it's not a 25% increase in the cost. This is like almost a 50, it's more than 50% increase in the cost because it goes from 3,000 to 49. So it's an increase of 1,900. That's literally a 66% increase in the cost of the ability for only an increase of 25% of the amount of damage that it does. And of course for the cost, it just makes absolutely no sense. And then they went and reduced the damage of the ability by 32%. So in terms of a point for point, even in terms of the increase, this is like a ridiculous nerf. It's like, Jesus, man, these people just really don't know. Soul Trap says this ability and its morph will no longer fill soul gems if the target affected was a target dummy or a critter. Fixed an issue where the application of these abilities, thank God they fixed that, right? Thank God they fixed that. Could not be dodged. Fix an issue where the application of these abilities could not be dodged. That's good. It should be dodged. And where each tick of the damage could be dodged. I didn't know that. It says updated the visual effect to better line up with the animation. I mean, it doesn't really have a sound to it. So unless it becomes a projectile that you can see the projectile, like it's still going to apply because there is no projectile that comes out of Soul Trap. so that you can see, oh, I see a soul trap flying towards me, let me dodge the soul trap. This is updated. The same thing with, for example, what's it called? Entropy. Entropy doesn't have a projectile that you see. It just has an animation, has an animation by the character, and it has a very minimal sound to it, which is what makes it difficult. Like, it's very easy to hear a spectral bow. It's very easy to hear a frag. Like a fire, a fire wheel has a huge visual effect. Neither one of those abilities has any sort of a visual effect that you see that makes it easier when you're fighting multiple opponents that oh, I have to dodge now. It's updated the visual effects to better line up with the animation of these abilities and reduce the damage of time by approximately 50% to it and its morph. Werewolf Infectious Claws. This ability and its morph now immediately apply the disease status effect to enemies hit and do disease damage rather than a hybrid physical disease damage. Decrease the damage per tick by approximately 60%. It says the Claws of Life morph. It says this morph now heals 100% of the damage caused instead of 50%. This will result in an overall reduction since the base damage has been reduced. Werewolf Transformation fixed an issue where this ability could persist without meeting the proper requirements. It says Werewolf Berserker decreased the damage per tick of this bleed applied from this morph by approximately 48%. It needed a much nerf. It actually did entirely too much damage, especially in no CP. If you take a look at what a no CP werewolf build looks like on the Berserker, literally just spamming light attacks on a werewolf build, and then you can take a look at that right here. As you can see, in no CP, just for light attacking, it dealt 22,000 damage over the course of 4 seconds. And of course, it was a bleed, which meant that it bypassed armor. It bypasses your physical resistance. This was a much needed nerf that I agree with. It says Fighters Guild. It says Beast Trap reduces the damage per tick of this ability and its morph by approximately 63%, which I don't understand. Originally, the ability procced twice, right? If you looked at the Fighters Guild ability and you looked at Trap, one morph of Trap, the one that is now called Barb Trap, procced twice. So it was a really good ability to use where you could kind of turtle around it and move back and forth between it to gain the damage to the extended duration for the minor force, as well as the immobilization. They removed it, and so as not to nerf the amount of damage that it did because it procced multiple times. So they were like, we removed the double proc portion because it only lasted, I believe, 6 seconds back then. They're like, we removed part of the proc, so we increased the damage to compensate for that effect. Now they go back and then subsequently nerf the amount of damage that it does by 63%. Trap Beast. So, and the other thing that doesn't make sense was that the reason that the lightweight trap morph did more damage than the regular Beast Trap was because Beast Trap procced twice. So with a double proc, you did more damage over time than just the singular lightweight trap. The other thing was that Beast Trap procs right in front of you, whereas lightweight trap has the ability to be tossed, which is why it dealt more damage. So it had a little bit more utility, only procced once. So that's why it naturally did more damage over time than just the double procking morph. And then they subsequently reduced both morphs by 63%, which just doesn't make sense because there was like a mindset behind why one morph did more damage than the other, and then that mindset got completely thrown out. Just doesn't make sense to nerf both morphs by the same amount of damage, since the functionality of both morphs is different. At least originally, in its original intent, the way it originally was intended to work, it functioned very differently. Like I said, with one change comes another change, which then gets reverted on both of them, and all it subsequently does. Like, this was just a waste of time. You should have just left the ability like it was, instead of going back and changing it here and then nerfing it here. It's like all you do is waste time. Entropy, this ability And the structure and HP worth no longer grant major sorcery. Interesting. Decreased the damage dealt of all 3 versions of this ability by 50%. Reduced the base cost of these abilities to 2700, down from 2970. Degeneration. This morph no longer grants magic attack when hitting an enemy affected by the damage over time, but continues to grant major sorcery from its original duration. So what does the other morph do? The other morph does. What does the other morph do? Does the other morph just heal and not give you major sorcery? So you either choose between the healing or major sorcery, right? Because they both deal damage over time. And just in terms of the effect, one gives you recovery, the other one gives you healing over time. It says, but the degeneration morph, right? And looking at degeneration, so this is the morph that currently gives you sustain, and this one gives you HP. So the one that gives you HP will no longer give you major sorcery. The one that gave you sustain no longer gives you sustain, but will give you major sorcery. Fire Rune, it says reduce the damage. Does anybody even use Fire Rune that they're so worried about nerfing it by 60%? What does Fire Rune even do now? Let me see. Doesn't do shit, right? Right? Fire Rune doesn't even do a lot of damage over time. Let me see something. It says reduce the damage per tick this morph by approximately 60%. It doesn't even deal damage. Like the only one that deals damage over time is the Scolding morph, right? Because the base doesn't deal damage over time. Did I miss something? Right? Scolding Rune. Like why are we so worried about nerfing the damage over time of this ability? It deals 5,000 damage over the course of 12 fucking seconds. This is what happens when you take flat reductions. Like, isn't an AoE doesn't deal damage over time? Nerfed by 50%. Like, who the fuck? So, and on this build, this is weapon damage. But let me see what it does on a magic version. Right? Maybe it does. Maybe it actually deals good damage. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Let's take a look at it on my Stork. So we'll go Mag Stork and see how much is damage over time that it needs to be nerfed by 60%. Because I was looking at it on a stamina build, that's why. So we'll go Mage's Guild, we'll go Fire Rune, Scalding Rune. I don't really see why it needs to be nerfed. It deals, and it's only the damage over time portion, right? So it deals 7,000 upfront damage, and it deals an amazing 10,700. Like it's 10,000. I just say it's 10,700 over the course of 14.4 seconds. So it deals a whopping 764 damage in PvP. Of course, that's divided by 2. So it deals an overwhelming, 382 damage that subsequently needed to get nerfed by 62% because fucking Scalding Rune OP. Says your order. It says mend wounds. It says fixed many issues with the animation of the heavy attack of this ability and its morph. It says you can no longer attempt and fail to heal the wildlife critters. It says of Tamriel. It says this also fixed an issue where your character would erratically convulse when attempting to channel these abilities on a target you couldn't actually target. Okay. Undaunted. It says the spawn broodlings fixed an issue where the spiders spawned from the synergies and the other morphs would merely fade out of existence upon death rather than displaying their death animations and then fading out of existence. Thank God they fixed that. Who knows what would have happened. Trapping Webs' ability and its morphs now last 10 seconds rather than 5. Thank God. That's what we need, longer duration. That's what we need, longer duration snares. Fix an issue where the synergy granted from these abilities were lasting longer than the ability that housed it. Warhorned from the Alliance War Assault. This ability now only apply to group members rather than allies. Guess that's a good change. It only applies to group members. Support, it says cleanse, reduced the healing. I mean, a lot of abilities should scale this way. For example, any ability that is a smart heal. Smart heals should only heal people in your group. Unless you're using like an area of effect. For example, like unless you're using, where is it? like Blessing of Protection, where the person actually stomps on the ground and it puts like a path of healing right in front of you. Like those morphs should be able to heal anybody, but anything that is a smart heal, like Light Champion, Rapid Regen, what's it called? Healing Ward, all these type of abilities that automatically target either the lowest health ally because they work their smart heals, those should be relegated to group only heals. It says cleanse. It says reduced the healing per negative effect of this morph to 5% at rank 4 from 10%. Were Templars complaining that other people like had access to a cleanse, and so they just nerfed the shit out of this? I mean, it has a ridiculous cost to it anyway. Champion System Synergizer says this passive now displays a visual effect when triggered. I'm sure there's a lot of other changes that I'm probably going to go through and read. I'm not going to do them all. This is already turning out to be a long video that I'm going to clip in half. With that said, like I said before, like a lot of these changes just absolutely don't make sense. And it comes from the standpoint of a development team that just really doesn't know what they're doing. Because instead of seeing a forward progression, right? Instead of you hear a mindset, this is the direction that we're moving. It has this sort of mind frame to it, and it makes sense, right? Mathematically, from a balance perspective, it makes sense. But instead, they take these swooping changes. It's like, is this ability an AoE damage over time? Well, we're going to reduce it by 60%, or we're going to reduce it by 59%. Is it an AoE ability that has this cost? Well, great, we're going to double that cost. Enjoy it. Let me know let me know feedback, in the forums. And this is what happens when you have a team of people who just unfortunately don't know what they're doing.